All right, so this is a tutorial on using envelopes in SuperCollider. All right, so basically an envelope is just a sort of a volume shape that you impose on a sound. So, so you can have a bit of an attack and a bit of a release. Um, and so here we have our MIDI sine synth def that we had been working on for another project there. All right, and if I wanted to add envelope, right now, if I play it, it's just a straight sine wave. Uh, sorry about that. It's just a straight up sine wave, right? Now, if I wanted to have it as enveloped, have something instead of just a constant tone goes boo, something that goes boom or boo, that I would have to add an envelope. Okay, so this is basically how you do it in SuperCollider. Envelopes are done with an envelope generator. So I'm going to make an extra variable here, and I'm going to go env equals envgen.ar. Okay, so the ugen is called the envelope generator. All right, so there's two parts to making an envelope in SuperCollider. You have your envelope generator, which is the actual unit generator. It's the actual ugen that will create an envelope signal. But within the envelope generator, you need an envelope definition. Now, SuperCollider has this nice class that built in. It's pretty usable, pretty sophisticated, and it will draw. It will automatically draw different types of envelopes for you. So that's the env object. Okay, and it's not a ugen, so there's no ar or kr. All right, and if you notice there, you have these different arguments that go in for the envelope. Okay, levels, times, curve, etc., etc. Okay, there are you can go to the envelope help file. That's quite helpful, and you can read about that. It tells you all the different kinds of envelopes. So there's these standard shape envelopes that are built into SuperCollider, and there's ones that are sustained types and ones that are just straight up types. So the standard ones are ones that basically give you a predetermined shape, and it has the attack and sustain all together at once. The sustained type of envelopes down here basically is when you send it a trigger and it goes on and it holds it at whatever note, and then you send it another trigger and it releases it. So a lot like hitting a MIDI keyboard or a key on the keyboard. When you hit it down, as long as you're holding the key down, it will keep sustaining a note. If you let go of the key, it has a release. Okay. So in this case, there's two different types, but in this case, I'm going to show you how to use the sustain type, and we're going to use the sustain A. There's the typical ADSR. You notice there's a bunch of choices here. Attack, decay, sustain, release. In this case, we're just going to use the ASR version. Okay, the ASR version, and again, we can see what arguments it has. It has attack time, sustain level, release time, and a curve. Okay, so I'm actually going to go over here and just show you a couple of different ones. I think we can just grab it from the help file there. Just scope a few of these. We can just straight up plot. Okay, so I'll just show you some of these. So, and show you how that works. So env.asr. Okay, and then we'll have a really short attack time, 0. This is in seconds, so that would be 10 milliseconds attack. A sustain level, you usually just keep that at 1. So that's not a time argument, that's an amplitude argument. That's at its highest level, the envelope's highest level, what level of amplitude would you have? And then the amount of time, the duration for the release. So let's just give that a 0.1, like that. Okay, and then we have a curve. So we'll just make the curve -4 for now, and I'll show you how the curves work. So, and then we'll do plot. That's just going to be a useful tool to show us how it looks. So if we do that, that's how that one looks right there. Envelope ASR with a 0.1 second, 10 millisecond attack, and then a 1.1 second, 100 millisecond decay. Okay, or release. Okay, and that's a curve. So let's have a quick look at how the curve affects things. So if we do a +4, you'll see the way it changes the shape. So there you see it's a sloped up attack and it's curved like a shark's fin, kind of. Okay, so you can do negative or positive curves. A zero curve, it's just straight linear up and down like a triangle. All right. So, and then, you know, obviously you can tweak the attack time if you want a kind of a slow attack. Let's do 0.7, 70 milliseconds, and a really quick release, 0.2, something like that. And let's make the curve -6, just for some extremity. So they're a really long attack and a pretty quick release. Okay, or we can have like a maybe a more something like that. Something like that. All right. So that gives you an idea of these envelope shapes. So attack, sustain, release. So attack, time, sustain, level. Mostly it stays at 1. I usually just keep it at 1 unless there's a good reason for. And then release time. Now you can look at the envelope tutorial. There's loads of different envelope shapes, built-in kind of things. But this is basically how you call an envelope. And this is the one we're going to use. There's ADSR with a decay, and that you can get a little more sophisticated envelopes. For our purposes, I think ASR will work, especially now working with the sine tone. Okay, so an envelope works a lot like the amplitude. You're going to multiply the signal with the envelope, and that's going to engage that envelope. Okay, so let's define the envelope. Again, we said we're going to use this envelope generator, which is our UGen, which is going to use the shape ASR, except it's going to make it a signal. You know, it's going to generate a signal based on this envelope. And ASR, now I'm going to put in some arguments for the various variables there, attack, sustain, and release, or just attack and release and curve. All right, but in our case, in this mouse Theremin project, we probably don't want to necessarily need to change the envelope a lot. We can, but it's good to have that ability. So we're going to make these arguments. So I'll make an argument called attack, ATK. All right, and this next one I think is just sustain level. So we'll just keep that at 1. I'm going to hard code that because I don't think I have any reason to change that. And then I'm going to put a release time, REL, and then I'm going to have a curve, CRV. These are all arguments that can be changed on the outside. I have to assign them now. ATK, and the default we'll call 0.01 as a default value. And then the REL, we'll have that as a 0.1 release value. And a curve, we'll keep it as a CRV. We'll keep the default curve negative, say 3 is fine. Now you noticed I put a space between the equal sign and the negative. If I was to, it would throw error if I was to do that, because that's a different kind of symbol, equals negative. All right, so you just got to make sure if you're doing that, you have to have a space there. Okay, so I think that'll mostly do it. We're going to generate this envelope. It's going to have at least initially this attack sustain curve, and then we're going to multiply that by ENV. Okay. Now one last thing we have to do for our envelope generator, it comes with this handy, the second argument is this thing called a gate. So this is this idea that in this, especially with these type of sustained shapes, you send it a trigger, you send it some kind of trigger, and then it engages the envelope. So in this case, gate 1, that's what the gate argument is for. So I send it a 1, the envelope starts and holds open until I send the gate a 0, and then it closes that envelope based on my release time. Okay, so attacks, sustains at 1, gate 0, it releases over this amount of time and goes away. Okay, or goes to 0 really. Okay, and then there's this done action bit, which we won't get into right now. But so we need to have a trigger that we can again hit from the outside, and we're just going to call this gate or trig. I'm going to call it trig. Okay, you can call it envelope trig or trig, and we'll make that argument. And it depends on if when you start your synth, you want it playing right away or not. I'm going to actually make the envelope 0 so that we actually have to trigger it to make, the trigger 0, so that we actually have to trigger it to make it sound. All right. So, and I'll show you how that works if that's a bit confusing. Basically, the trigger will allow you to trigger that envelope using an argument. All right. So let me send that synth def to the server. And I didn't really change anything, so we'll keep this here. So notice this time when I evaluate, when I make a synth, when I create an instance of that synth-def MIDI sign, I create a synth, there's no sound. That's because the trigger is by default 0, so the envelope is closed. All right. Now if I go ahead and set that, a.set the trigger to 1, it'll engage the envelope and hold open. Okay? And if I make the trigger 0, it'll release it. Okay? And let's try some other things. I don't know if I can do multiple, but let's try some things just so you can see how the envelope sounds. We're going to make the attack, let's see, kind of longish. Okay, and we'll make the release very abrupt. Really abrupt, almost 0. Okay, so let's evaluate that. So it's, technically my synth is still running in the background. It's just not making any sound because the envelope's at 0. So it's my signal is being multiplied by 0 right now, so no signal's coming out. Okay, so let's engage that trigger with a new attack, and you'll notice it's a longer attack. Okay, and then a quick release. Okay, let's make it much more dramatic so we can really hear it. That's a little bit better. And then a dramatic release. Oops, and then trigger abrupt release. We can have a really long release too if you want. Make that 0.9, and even longer attack. We'll make a real, and maybe change our pitch to something a little bit higher. Okay, and then the slower release. Okay, so you see how that works. We can change the curve, of course, as well. Let's make it a positive 4, and let's see what that does for it. So that's that more sort of, I don't know, concave or convex curve that goes up a little more gradually, and it'll come down a little bit more abruptly, I think. Yeah. Okay. So I think that kind of explains envelopes for now, and we've also incorporated the envelope into our mouse theremin. Basically, we've created an envelope generator, mgen envelope generator, ugen. It asks for an envelope shape. It's gonna, what kind of envelope should we generate? And it also has a trigger that triggers that envelope on and holds it, and then it triggers it off and releases it. We've created some arguments for our envelope shape that can be changed in real time on the fly, and that's attack, release, and curve. We've kept the sustained level at 1. That, of course, can be changed as well. And finally, we are multiplying our signal not only by the overall amplitude, so meaning that we can change it, even though the envelope is at 1, we can make the maximum of the envelope a little quieter by changing the amplitude. We also multiplying it by the envelope, which will give us that amplitude shape. Okay, and I showed you how to trigger it on using the set command trigger 1. So if you want to play it, since the default is 0 for the trigger, if you want to play it on creation, we're going to have to set the trig to 1 so that it plays as soon as you play it. Okay, well, there you go.